It seems like this week is relatively calm, but there's still a lot I want to discuss with you.
Well, well, I would not agree, actually. And this is something that's perhaps a lot been widely missed. But the Russians have been coming under a lot of pressure, it seems, from India and Brazil to begin negotiations with Ukraine. And they're getting annoyed about this. And the Russian foreign minister, Sergei Lavrov, said, he made certain public comments to India and Brazil, who apparently are asking Russia to agree a ceasefire. And they say, why do you not understand the situation? We've explained it to you many times. Ukraine is incredibly dangerous to us. They are persecuting Russians in Ukraine.
Mhm.
Look at China. Look at President Xi Jinping, who's understood the situation much better and has made certain comments about how, in order to resolve a problem effectively, you need to approach it by examining its root causes. And these are public comments that the Russian foreign minister, Sergei Lavrov, has just been making. So it's the first time I can remember when the Russians have criticized Brazil and India. And I think mostly these criticisms are up towards Brazil. He did this during a conference in Saudi Arabia. He said that the Brazilians and the Indians have been coming to us and saying, why don't you consider a ceasefire at this time? And it doesn't make sense to have a ceasefire at this time because Ukraine has shown no interest in addressing the underlying questions, problems of the war. And Lavrov has also said that you should learn, India and Brazil should learn from China's position, where President Xi Jinping and the Chinese have shown much more profound understanding of the conflict and have said publicly, and it's there in all of their plans and proposals, that in order to resolve this problem satisfactorily, you have to look at the underlying causes and have to address and deal with the underlying causes. And only if that happens will you come up with a just and sustainable solution. So, this is the first time that the Russians have criticized fellow BRIC states
Mhm.
publicly, and in this case, it's India and Brazil. And it's very interesting that they're contrasting the stance of India and Brazil with China's. And I can actually find you Lavrov's words. They're quite long, so
Mhm.
but they are there on the in the foreign ministry. Um, he says that today I discussed this topic with my counterparts from Brazil and India because they display a certain concerned approach, one that we understand to facilitate crisis resolution. I drew their attention to the fact that it is the persecution of Russian people in Ukraine that is the key problem. We are urging them to focus on this. We discuss this with our Chinese friends too. No success will be achieved unless we get to the root of the problem. In this context, we appreciate the Global Security Initiative announced by President Xi Jinping, which says that it is necessary to start analyzing any conflict from its prime causes. This refers fully to the Ukraine crisis. The prime causes will go for good if they are laid bare and condemned. So it's the first criticism by Russia ever of BRICS friends. They're going out of their way to say India and Brazil are their friends, but they don't really understand the problem. And look at China. China understands it so much better, and you should learn from our friends in China and look at what President Xi is saying. It's an extraordinary statement from Lavrov, and it follows similar um, criticisms, very veiled criticisms of Brazil and India, which have been made by President Putin himself.
Yeah, I also think, yeah, I was thinking that that something similar, but not as as the clear, yeah. Well, I do find that both
Yeah.
India and Brazil probably they're a little bit too eager to play this mediator role or something. Um, Being a good mediator actually it's a hard thing, isn't it? I think if you look at the how China mediated this rapprochement between Iran and the Saudi. The thing about that is China sees both sides are serious. Both Saudi and the Iran are seriously wants to right have this negotiation, have to improve the relationship, and that's when the mediator can come in saying, "Okay, come here, let's talk this through." But in this case, in Ukraine and Russia, I mean, Ukraine doesn't have a serious, I mean, I can't see anything indicate that seriously they want to talk because if they seriously want to talk, they can talk, right? And then without the seriousness from the Ukraine side, just ask Russia to have a ceasefire. That seems to me like a very, it's not going to be productive at all, isn't it? That they're very eager to be the mediator or something.
You're
Isn't it?
You are absolutely correct. Both Prime Minister Modi, who suffered a setback in his recent election, and President Lula are very, very anxious to achieve some great diplomatic success, which they can take to their people and tell them, look how what a great leader and what a tremendous diplomat I am. It isn't like that. Now, I should explain. I have been a mediator many times myself in my previous work when I used to work at the Royal Courts of Justice. I was asked by the parties to act as a mediator many times. And that can only work when both parties ask you to become the mediator. It doesn't work at all if you want to become the mediator and tell each side, well, look, I'm here, why don't you accept me as mediator? That isn't how it happens. The other thing about being a mediator is that it must be done absolutely privately. When we discovered that China was acting as mediator between Saudi Arabia and Iran, we discovered that China was mediating between Saudi Arabia and Iran after the
Yeah.
mediation was successful.
Yeah.
It was all conducted completely privately. And again, coming along, so, Modi going off to Kiev, Lula making his various public comments. That is not how mediation is done. What you have here, this is the fundamental difference. And I think in India, by the way, there's been a lot of criticism within India itself of what Prime Minister Modi has tried to do. And I think Prime Minister Modi is going to change tack fairly quickly. I think he's embarrassed by this. But I think Modi doesn't understand mediation very well. And I don't think that Brazil, Lula, has an understanding of what mediation involves. And I'm going to say, I don't think Brazil has the depth of diplomatic skill that China does, which enables China to conduct mediation. India does, by the way. India has some very capable diplomats, but I don't think Brazil does. I think that they're very new to being an important country. They want to establish themselves very fast. President Lula apparently has his own internal and domestic problems. He's coming under some pressure from the Americans. Brazil and India have been working together on this. And I suspect that it's President Lula, more even than Prime Minister Modi, who is behind this thing. And as I said, I think it's already failed. And it's been done just a few weeks before the BRICS summit in Kazan. And I get the sense from these words, and I didn't read all of Lavrov's words. Some of them are very pointed in their criticism, and Putin's still more so, by the way. I think what has happened, all that they've managed to do, is annoy the Russians.
Yeah. Yeah, I think so too. Yeah. And but but sometimes I do think countries, in particular, if they think they are rising, they very quickly wants to
Yeah.
take part in international affairs and play a very important role, that but everything has its time. I think in China we say, patience is virtue,
Everything
right?
has its
Yeah.
Well, indeed, everything has its time, and
Time.
patience
Yeah.
is virtue,
Yeah.
especially in diplomatic discussions. You
Hmm.
mustn't rush these things.
Yeah.
You have to wait. And of
Yeah.
course, you can tell each side, look, if you want to talk to me, if you want to look for a solution, well, Xi Jinping went about it the right way. He spoke out, he set out principles last year.
Hmm.
He appointed Li Hui,
Yeah.
that he's there. If
Yeah.
either side wants at some point to talk,
Hmm.
they can talk. But coming along and presenting your own ideas, one of the first rules of mediation is you do not present your own plan and your own ideas. You don't come along and say, "Well, why don't you have a ceasefire?" You don't do that. That's not what a mediator does. A mediator is not somebody who comes up with a peace plan. It is
Yeah.
somebody who facilitates diplomacy between the parties
Yeah. Let them come up. Yeah. With a solution. Yes. Yeah. That they both can
with
accept.
their
Yeah. In the
solution.
end, it has to come from them. Yes.
Yes, yes. It has to
Yeah.
come from them. You can
Uh-huh.
help them. You can
Yeah.
provide a means of communication. You could try to steer discussions. You could
Hmm.
look for common ground, but it's a long, slow process. It'll between Russia and Ukraine, especially so, and certainly not the way it can't be done in the way that Brazil and India want it.
Yeah. Um, okay. Since we're talking about Ukraine, um, I even want to ask you this last time. So these two Russian ballistic missiles, they struck a military academy in Poltava and
Poltava,
followed
Poltava, yeah.
Poltava. Okay, and that followed by this foreign minister, Swedish foreign minister resigned. Now the Chinese media has been over this discussing and saying that the Saab, which is I guess, military contractor from Sweden, and the Saab instructors were among those people being killed. There are many people being killed in that. The official numbers it's not true. There's way more than the official numbers, and in particular, Saab has instructors. The number the Chinese media said it was like a 37 or maybe more. Saab instructors were killed, and that was the main reason the Swedish foreign minister Tobias Bill Sturm that he resigned. But that's not how the Western mainstream media reported it. What's your take on that? Are those two things related?
Well, they are related. I'm going to say straight away the Chinese media are getting this right. I was uncertain initially about who was telling the truth about this story, but I think the cumulative information that's coming from Sweden is that this is absolutely what happened, and it seems that Saab, which is it's a big company, but it's a Swedish company. It's not a giant corporation. This has been a devastating disaster for them. I mean, many of their best people have been killed or wounded in this. And the other thing was conducting this training exercise, if that's what it was, in a place like Poltava, which is in eastern Ukraine. It's east of the Dnieper, well within range of Russian missiles. And bringing together all of these people in this one place was unbelievably reckless. And for the record, the Russians basically agree with the Chinese account. I mean, the Russian account is very similar to the Chinese account.
I think that's where they
And
got
what the
there.
Russians basically
Yeah.
have said,
Yeah. Mhm.
well, probably they had intelligence. They almost certainly knew these people were there
Yeah.
already. But what the Russians are saying is that the Westerners, the Swedes and others, had this assumption that the very fact that there were Westerners in these sort of buildings would somehow deter the Russians from launching strikes, whereas that might have been true at the start of the conflict, but by this point, the Russians are now so angry with the West, and they feel that the West is so hostile to them that instead of the Russians holding back from launching attacks on positions where the Westerners are known to be, the Russians, on the contrary, are now targeting them. They're actually hunting the Western advisors and technicians and are attacking them wherever they can.
And yeah, and I also think it also makes sense that because there isn't any official reason the foreign minister resigned. He didn't give even like health reason, family reason. He didn't
Yeah.
even say that. He wasn't there very long,
Yeah.
and he also, I would say the only thing he achieved during his tenure is to push Sweden into NATO, and it's very reasonable to
Mm.
to believe those people, the Saab employees. I mean, remember these, if it's true, it seems like it is. These are civilians. If they are Saab employees, right? They are not soldiers. They are not military officials. For them, for their families, these people are just having a business trip. And then all this happened, like these
Yes.
people just dead. I would think the families would want some answer, right? Want some accountabilities. And that could very well be the pressure for him to resign, I think. And now we don't get any confirmation of all that. And then I read the Swedish media as
Mm.
well, that they are denying this is true, but they don't give a lot of explanation. The deny is very simple. Oh, that's not that
No.
it's there's no foundation for that. That's it. They don't explain anything else. So I think it's very reasonable to assume that this is probably the reason, don't you think?
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, I'm not 100% certain
Hmm.
it is the reason, but as you correctly say, why else would this thing have happened? And
Yeah.
the Russian reports, at least, were coming out and saying that there were Swedes there and that a lot of Swedish people were killed before the Swedish foreign minister resigned. So there is clearly a policy in the West to deny uh, that deaths, when they happen, of Western technicians, scientists, advisors, military people, are connected with the fighting in Ukraine. Sometimes all kinds of stories are put about that some so and so died in an accident or a heart attack or something like this. But as many people are now pointing out, there's all kinds of unexpected deaths, unexplained deaths starting to appear. And I suspect that this is what happened in this instance, in this particular case.
Yeah.
The West is starting to pay a price in terms of its people. They are now starting to die in Ukraine. And this, I think, is having an effect. It's having an effect on in Germany, where the Germans are now talking about the need for peace.
Hmm. Yeah.
Perhaps it will soon have an effect in Sweden as well.